While Garthwaite was revitalising a key British industry, in northern France, a young woman was growing up in obscurity. She would go on to use her imagination to revolutionise the defining industry of the French. Her story leads us to the most fabulous court of the 18th century, that of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette.
Her name was Rose Bertin. Now, you may not have heard of her, but she ingeniously built herself into the world's first celebrity fashion designer. If it wasn't for Bertin, Dior and Chanel would never have existed.
And Paris might never have become the undisputed capital of fashion. Yet Bertin's start in life in no way suggested the glittering possibilities to come. Born into an artisan family in Picardy, at 9, Bertin was apprenticed to a dressmaker to learn the mysteries of a trade for centuries, the preserve of men.
In the late 17th century, bands of intrepid seamstresses broke the male monopoly on dressmaking, earning the right to cut and construct clothes for women and children, establishing their own all-female guilds. Within a century, the canniest had established themselves as flourishing businesswomen, not sweated labour. Adept at predicting aesthetic change and able to capture the zeitgeist in clothes.
With women now having the right to dress women, Bertin followed her dream to Paris, and aged just 16, charmed her way into a chic fashion emporium. Her inventiveness in trimmings and her ability to attract noble patrons served her well. The female proprietor of the shop invited her into partnership. In 1770, Bertin got financial backing from an aristocratic client to go solo.
Rose Bertin's shop was on the Rue Saint-Honoré. She called it Le Grand Mogol after a famous diamond, a title that was glittering with exoticism and exclusivity. It was made, the exterior, of marble, faux marble, in lemon and lavender. Inside, it was decorated with portraits of her royal clients from all across Europe.
Bertin displayed literally hundreds of fully trimmed outfits. So what was her secret? I've come to meet designer Fanny Wilkes, who specialises in recreating historical fashions, to find out just what it was that made Bertin such an innovator.
Fanny, you've modelled for us 2 different kinds of looks, and I can see that this is a formal court dress, and this is for more informal, I would think, afternoon wear. What did Rose Bertin do differently on a dress like this? What marked her out from her competitors?
She finds new models. She finds new shapes, new materials, new colors, new matching. Between all the accessories and the hat. It was possible for her to work with dresses like empty canvas. Yeah. She put a lot of jewels, trims, laces, feathers, a lot of things that made the dress much more beautiful.
So really she is what we might think of as also as a stylist, in the kind of Hollywood sense of a stylist, who's somebody
not only dresses, but the walls.
Yeah, the tout ensemble.
But Bertin's ambitions lay beyond just fashioning the nobility. This low-born artisan had set her eyes on impressing a future queen. When the young Austrian princess Marie Antoinette arrived in France in 1770, she was accused of being dowdy. Bertin saw her chance and through one of her aristocratic clients secured an introduction. From that moment, a new collaboration was born. Marie Antoinette's dowdy days were behind her. Fashion and history were set on a new and momentous course.
Shortly after they met, Marie Antoinette invited Rose Bertin behind the scenes to her own private apartments. And so it was here, not in the grand formal bedroom, that they had their bi-weekly meetings to design her entire look and to perform the fittings.
Out of those meetings came the unforgettable image we all know today. Bertin dressed Marie Antoinette for her husband's coronation, not in the traditional ceremonial garb, but in the contemporary gallant style, covered in whimsical embroidery and sparkling with sapphires. But it was the towering Bertin pouf, a raised coiffure, quite literally built with scaffolding, pads and pomade, which truly inflated the Queen's stature, adding 3 feet to her height. A courtier remarked, to be the most à la mode woman alive seemed to Marie Antoinette the most desirable thing. The young Queen had become a walking art installation, and the architect of all this, Rose Bertin, demanded full recognition for her genius.
Challenged by a client's husband about the whopping size of her bill, Bertin reportedly brushed him off, comparing herself to a fated male painter and querying whether he was only paid according to the size of his canvas and colours. If his fee was not based on the price of his materials, then why should hers be? Bertin had grasped something that women striving in a creative field had to learn: the importance of the right persona. Was she really that arrogant? We can never know. But clearly she recognised the signal importance of projecting a memorable personality and titanic self-belief. The prototype of the demanding empress and diva of fashion was born here.
But Bertin's creation also changed the course of economic history.
What makes all this so important is the fact that Marie Antoinette disposed of her dresses at the end of every season and got a whole new set. So what that means is something akin to the modern fashion cycle was whirring into life.
Business boomed. Bertin's designs sped across Europe on the backs of dolls, or Pandoras as they were known. They took prototypes of French fashion to every court, from Spain to Russia. Bertin's exuberant confections fed Marie Antoinette's reputation for extravagance. But in the end, it was a simple gown that would surprisingly draw the greatest uproar. In 1783, Bertin dressed the Queen in an informal muslin chemise. It was a sea change in fashion history. All over Europe, women abandoned their stiff, formal silk dresses in favour of lighter, less structured clothes made out of Indian cottons. But to the French public, it looked as if the Queen was displaying her underwear. It was an insult to France itself. The silk industry was up in arms at the betrayal. It's at this point that telling Bertin's story brings me face to face with another female artist who stamped her style on Europe thanks to the patronage of Marie Antoinette. Her name is Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. Bertin may have dressed the Queen, but it was Lebrun who became the Queen's favourite portrait painter, displaying the monarch and her style to the world.
Vigée-Lebrun was one of the greatest portrait painters of her generation. But for Joshua Reynolds, she was one of the greatest portrait painters of any generation, surpassing even Van Dyck. This is just one of at least 30 paintings she completed of Marie Antoinette. And it's a beautiful symphony in colour, in grey and pink. It's also masterful in its depiction of texture, from the sheen on the grey silk, the airiness of the lace, and the softness of those feathers. I feel you can touch them. But above all, what she's managed to do is transform a really rather plain queen into a vision of ravishing, radiant, enchanting prettiness.
From the outset, Vigée Lebrun had a number of advantages. She was born in Paris, the capital of power, taste and fashion. Her artist father mentored her, and as a teenager, she was already painting portraits and had a studio. In return, she supported the family.
In 1776, aged 20, she wed an art dealer. She could copy his collection of old masters, and naturally he shared his contacts with her, opening up a rich seam of clients. The wife benefited from the husband's business, but the husband recognized a talented asset when he saw one.
And one of her assets she traded on mercilessly. In those days, beauty was really an advantage, she wrote in her memoirs. Over her career, she painted 37 self-portraits, convinced they were her most effective calling card. Vigée Lebrun even credited this one with gaining her entry into the prestigious French Academy, aged 28. But she was far more than just a pretty face. She had an inspired ability to read the cultural zeitgeist. In late 18th century France, thanks to Enlightenment philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, good parenting was a hot topic. In the past, the rich had tended to outsource the raising of their children. But Rousseau insisted that women should not shirk their natural role. Vigée Lebrun cleverly reflected and shaped these ideals in a sentimental style of portraiture. And she started with herself and her daughter Julie.
Madonna and child, tender, informal, but for me, a bit too saccharine. She's responding here to Rousseau's call for a return to the maternal, the dutiful and the natural. But rather brilliantly, she's taken the idea of nature and transformed it into fashion.
But one maternal portrait challenged Vigée Lebrun's skills to the maximum. In 1787, she accepted a daunting commission to change the nation's perception of its monarchy. The task to present Marie Antoinette not as a flamboyant queen, but as a compassionate mother. With the storm clouds of revolution gathering, this was fundamentally a political portrait.
The aim of this huge painting is to save the Queen's reputation.
So the Queen, by this point, has already developed a reputation for ostentation, excess, and there's a lot of criticism of her finances, is there not?
Yes, absolutely. Because Marie Antoinette was so much hated, the intention here is to make her look simple and serious. This is why you have the jewel casket at the back, making a reference to a Roman episode. It's the story of Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi. When asked by a friend to show her jewels, Cornelia said that her only jewels were her children, and she presented her children, which is exactly what Marie Antoinette is doing here. She's putting forward her children, her three children.
But I think what's also interesting is that it shows that Vigée Lebrun can fulfill a very complicated brief.
She really thought about the message that the painting should convey.
But given the bankruptcy of royal finances, it would take more than a portrait, however brilliantly executed, to rescue the reputation of the French Queen. Or, for that matter, the two artists who helped create it.
Critics saw these women as feeding the Queen's taste for ostentatious luxury, flaunting exquisite excess while the state went bankrupt.
When revolution erupted in 1789, the mob attacked Versailles, and their immediate target showed just how much the people hated Rose Bertin. The tapestries and the paintings went untouched. Instead, the mob went straight to Marie Antoinette's wardrobe and tore Bertin's fairy tale creations to shreds. Bertin tried to ride out the storm, presenting herself as a citoyenne, gamely selling revolutionary cockades.
But her brand was toxic now. She was too closely associated with the frills of the Ancien regime. Business suffered, and in 1792 she decamped to London.
Before she fled, however, she did one last service for her royal client. In the wake of the king's execution, she sent Marie Antoinette a mourning outfit. She wore it day and night for months until her own execution, by which time it hung on her body in tatters. Bertin opened a modest shop in London, hoping to recover her debts, but it came to nothing. Her moment had passed. Yet her legacy lives on. She had established Paris as the capital of haute couture, and not even revolutionaries could take that away. For Vigée-Lebrun, however, the outcome of the revolution was very different. Bold and ambitious still, she fled Paris for Italy, achieving a level of international success in the courts of Italy and Russia, matched by few men and no other women of the period. Here in Florence, in the famous Vasari corridor, lined with self-portraits by the great artists of Europe, she is one of only a handful of women permitted to stake their claim to posterity.
The unrepentant Vigée-Lebrun, still painting away, still with that impossible prettiness which masks her grim, gritty determination. And here she is painting Marie Antoinette. She still allied herself with the Ancien regime and with the woman that made her.
There is a contradiction here. Marie Antoinette is the ultimate symbol of elitism, yet she was also an enabler of female talent, in sharp contrast to what was to come. While one might have thought a revolution with a credo of liberty, equality and fraternity would have helped creative women, that wasn't to be. The old academy, open to exceptional women, was replaced by the Institute of France, that barred women artists altogether.
It's one of the great ironies that the Ancien regime was actually more receptive to female creativity than the Republic, because revolutionaries, despite their egalitarian rhetoric, are often invincibly sexist. The story of women and art is no simple onward march to formal recognition. There were setbacks as well as